Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. This video is a general guide to raid events in Dragalia Lost as of the Loyalty's Requiem rerun in May 2020. If you're watching this in the future, don't worry too much. Raid events all tend to work similarly in Dragalia Lost, so most of the tips and tricks we discuss today should roll forward to future content. We'll start with a general overview of how raid events are structured, then toward the latter half of the video, focus on gameplay tips. Loyalty's Requiem is a limited time special event focused on epic raid battles where a total of 4 players and their 16 adventurers face off against the larger-than-life fiery titan known as Fraganoth. Co-op raid battles are undoubtedly the main draw of limited time raid events, but each one has a bit more to it than just that. We'll use Loyalty's Requiem as an example to walk through everything on offer. When you first open the event, you'll be met with some basic story chapters interspersed with lower difficulty quests. These narrative snippets and easy battles are meant to set the stage for the main clash, and the great thing is they make it so that even a total beginner can at least read and enjoy the raid story. While you play this initial content, you'll befriend a free 4-star adventurer who will join you during the raid. In Loyalty's Requiem, that adventurer is Celiera, everyone's favorite hot-blooded instructor. These free adventurers have some weaknesses that make them slightly worse than summonable characters, such as not having 100% affliction resistance before unlocking their mana spirals. However, they also tend to specialize against the raid boss for the raid where they make their debut. For instance, Celiera is water element and has the Thaumian's Bane ability, both of which let her do bonus damage to Fraganoth. Raid characters will join your roster permanently so long as you forge a friendship with them before the event ends. To forge a friendship with the character on your team and clear just about any quests in the game to slowly fill up a friendship gauge. When this maxes out at 500, they'll join your Halidom forever. There's absolutely no downside to these free characters, and reading their stories is a way to obtain free Wormite, so make sure that they join your squad. Many events will even have a summoning ticket bonus if you get the raid character to befriend you on the first day of the event. A fast way to build friendship if you're short on time is to put the raid unit on your team and use skip tickets to clear a quest repeatedly. As you play through the raid story content, you'll eventually reach a cliffhanger where a grand battle is set to unfold. Most raids lean into the mythos that the boss has spawned in from another plane, and you must fight and contain it within the other world or the space between worlds. How this works from a gameplay standpoint is that you'll collect something called Otherworld Fragments by playing a regular boss battle, then spin those as an extra cost alongside Gatherwings to join and play raid battles. The normal boss battles only come in beginner and expert difficulties, making them relatively simple to navigate. I strongly suggest running these boss battles using stamina rather than Gatherwings. Not only is that more efficient, but realistically that'll mean you're not waiting around in empty lobbies too. Raid events usually have daily endeavors to do at least one boss battle per day, and in Loyalty's Requiem, the name of the boss is King Archeol, and he shouldn't be a challenge for Celiera plus a story team. Generally speaking, for raid events, you'll want to save most of your wings for the event itself and use your stamina for the other types of daily content you tend to do. Once you obtain some Otherworld fragments from a boss battle or two, you'll be able to spin them plus Gatherwings to play raid battles. Unlike regular boss battles, raid battles come with a wide range of difficulties. There's still beginner and expert, but also more difficulties like EX, Nightmare, and Omega. This can be somewhat tricky to navigate at first, but it's slightly easier once you understand how the reward structure for raid events works. Raid events have 4 main sources of rewards: endeavors, blazons, grand bounties, and emblems. Let's start with the simplest rewards, which are for endeavors. Endeavors are essentially laundry lists of daily and event-long tasks with incentives like Wormite or special epithets attached. You can view these at any time on the Endeavors page, and it's worth pacing yourself during the raid event to try clear all the daily endeavors each day that the event is active. Besides daily and limited endeavors, each quest in the event also has some inherent endeavors for deathless clears, plus first clear bonuses tied to it. These include special rewards for Omega Solo, Omega Level 1, and Omega Level 2, all of which are one and done content. If you clear them once in the whole event without anyone on your team dying, you've gotten everything you can out of them. Next up for rewards are Blazons. Blazons are lottery tickets that can be used to summon from special pools filled with goodies like crafting materials, a free raid dragon, and a free raid worm print. The free print is the one shown on the Blazon summoning page, and it's usually not very strong, but you'll also get other random worm prints from Blazon summons as well, sometimes even a valuable 5-star print, like Jewels of the Sun in the case of Loyalty's Requiem. The free dragon, on the other hand, is typically very respectable for early game players because you may still not have that many 4-star and 5-star dragons max unbound from summoning. The dragon shares an element with the raid boss, meaning it won't be at its most effective for this raid, but it could come in handy later on. It's a good idea to pick up all 5 free copies of the dragon during the event and max unbind them into one. By the time you get max unbound 4-star gacha dragons, the raid dragons will usually be outclassed, but a few of them still have a small niche, and it's always good to have more dragons in your dragon roost, since building a bond with them grants you extra sunlight ores and even precious wormite via stories. Blazon boxes refresh after they're emptied, and they even include a small amount of wormite per box. Some raid events like the New Year's raids encourage you to repeatedly play them and get good rewards from Blazons, but for the most part it's generally not worth trying to overfarm. The next type of rewards from raid events is Grand Bounties. These are special treasure chests you get the first time you clear a Nightmare raid battle each day. Also called Ultra Raid battles, Nightmare raids are harder than EX raids but easier than Omega ones. They're definitely possible to clear daily via co-op quick play, since most late game players have the strength to carry or solo this level of difficulty. They'll be playing this too because Grand Bounties contain precious rewards. Each Grand Bounty has a mix of A, 20 succulent dragon fruit, 3 4-leaf clovers, or 1,000 Eldwater, B, a golden fragment, a sunlight ore, or a Damascus crystal, C, a twinkling grain, and D, between 100 and 200 bronze and silver emblems. And well, emblems are the final reward type for raid events. These are basically milestone trackers that come in bronze, silver, and gold varieties. The Emblems tab on the event page has a list of rewards for each emblem tier, and you click on the reward to accept it once you have the needed number of emblems. You aren't spending emblems in this process, only accumulating them, so don't feel you need to save up for one big spending spree. You can grab rewards right away as soon as you meet the threshold to do so. Bronze and silver rewards go up to 2,000 each, and gold rewards go up to 5,000, but the best stuff stops at 1,000 bronze and silver and 3,000 gold. So consider that if you don't want to fully grind the event. You gain emblems from pretty much everything you do within the raid. Boss battles grant bronze emblems. Beginner raid battles give you mostly silver emblems with some bronze, and Expert and above give you a mix of gold and silver emblems with a focus on gold. If you aim to max out the gold emblems, you should typically be able to mostly finish your silver emblems in the process, so there's less of a need to farm beginner raids. The drop rates are about equal among anything that's Expert or higher, so you also shouldn't feel it's necessary to grind out the raid on Nightmare or Omega unless you wish to do so. The difficulty with the most gold emblems dropped is actually EX, but that's partially due to the special nature of how it's unlocked. EX requires Otherworld gems to play instead of Otherworld fragments, and these are random rare drops from Experts and above raid battles. EX raids don't cost Gatherwings either, so think of these as bonus quests you get to run for free every so often. You can also hoard EX gems, which allows you to space out your play during the event to more easily do daily endeavors. Likewise, you can leave emblem milestones unclaimed, including milestones which grant Blazons. Leaving Blazon milestones unclaimed can be a good idea for those who want to play slightly less, since daily endeavors ask you to earn 300 Blazons each day, and this can feel like overkill toward the end of a raid event. Any Blazons claimed through the emblem list will still count toward the daily endeavor quota of 300. Some other notable things in the emblem list include copies of the raid dragon, free weapons, and keys to unlock the Omega difficulties themselves. If you're just starting out, consider anything you get from emblems to be good until you confirm otherwise. For instance, test free gear to see if it gives you a stat boost. With respect to Omega Keys, these exist at 600 bronze, 600 silver, and 3000 gold, and all 3 are needed to unlock Omega Raids. Special raid fights, which include a solo version and 1 or more co-op versions of varying difficulty. The co-op versions typically aren't available right when the raid starts, as they're reserved until many players have already had a chance to unlock the mode, typically toward a weekend or the end of the event. Loyalty's Requiem is the first raid to introduce a brand new Omega 2 difficulty, and as mentioned earlier, Omega Raids are best thought of as something to try to do once before the end of the event. Omega 2 in particular doesn't have special rewards, it's mainly there for the challenge. As you play boss battles and raid battles, you'll also steadily accumulate something called raid boosts. These are special bonuses for that raid only that power up your entire team, boosting their might total and making it easier to face off against harder content. The basic boosts include damage up to 100%, HP up to 50%, shapeshift prep up to 25%, and dragon time up to 50%. There are also rare raid boosts obtained randomly after completing quests in the event, with even stronger bonuses, like skill damage plus 25%, critical rate plus 15%, or overdrive punisher plus 25%, just to name a few. There's usually half a dozen or so rare boosts, but what you happen to get will vary with luck from one raid to the next. And, well, that pretty much covers the general framework for most, if not all, raid special events. You're going to want to play Nightmare once per day, and otherwise farm expert and do boss battles every so often to get Otherworld fragments to keep playing. Eventually, once you unlock it, you'll want to do the Omega Raid once during the event and keep track of all daily endeavors. At that point, you're pretty much good to go. Of note, Dragalia Lost also has something called Astral Raids. Those aren't really a full event, but rather a chance to battle past raid bosses again for good rewards during weekends when no proper raid event is active. There's not as much structure around these events, but they're well worth doing, and a quick tip if you're struggling with them is to use Manticore weapons. Those weapons have a 60% Astral Bane ability to boost your damage output. Another tip is to make sure to check out the Astral Raid Treasure Trade, where you can trade in your Astral Shards and play during the week to obtain the maximum of 300 Astral pieces so that you can play the full amount of Astral Raids on the weekend. Next, let's get into some tips for the actual raid battles themselves. The nature of 16 adventure quests is slightly different than normal co-op battles, so I think it's worth taking the time to explain why and identify what tends to work better and what works worse in a raid setting. Raids are the one place where Dragalia differentiates between your team versus your allies. Skills which only affect your team are limited to your party of 4 units, but those which create a zone or affect nearby or all allies can potentially benefit all 16 adventurers in the raid, making them much more valuable in this context. This means that buff zones, buffs to self and nearby allies, and healing skills, especially regen, are more valuable than normal in a raid because each effect has more beneficiaries. Debuffs to the raid boss's defense also work very well because these increase the damage output of all 16 units in the raid, not just your team's damage output. With both the buff zone and debuffs, this makes Gala Cleo fantastic for raid events. Unlike zones and debuffs, healing is somewhat counterbalanced because its potency is reduced in raids, perhaps to account for the fact that all 4 teams might have healing in one form or another. Nevertheless, dragons like Freya and Phoenix are still excellent raid staples when survival is an issue. And speaking of dragons, that's another mechanic that tends to shine more in raid battles than in other settings. Historically, many raids had special epithets obtainable by clearing a certain difficulty within a time limit, and a common tactic was to use Wormprints with Shapeshift Prep, because it stacks across all 16 units in the raid, meaning you can start with 100% of your dragon gauge filled in a coordinated group. This method is no longer as popular since many characters tend to outperform their dragon forms now. However, it's still quite solid for units whose kits revolve around shapeshifting like Gala Mim or Audric. Another reason why dragons may have been so dominant in the pre-raid boost meta is the large size of their hitboxes. Raid bosses are unique in that they have multiple parts which can be demolished, and doing so restores a sizable chunk of dragon gauge. Skills with a big hitbox, be those dragon skills or adventurer skills, shine in raids since they can hit both the main body of the boss and one or more parts. This doesn't always work, but when it does, you'll notice by the pop of damage numbers on the screen. Demolishing boss parts is also a fundamental strategy in raid battles. Nowadays, you may not notice this much on easier difficulties where boosts and veteran players end most lobbies quickly. However, when taking on harder difficulties like Omega 2 and Loyalty's Requiem, this strategy resurges in importance. Coordinating around demolishing boss parts is essential because boss parts often dictate attack patterns for each raid boss, which moves they can use, and which moves cause purple versus red areas of effect. For instance, Fragonath's tail is good to take out early because it reduces his quick tailspin move from a purple AoE to a yellow or red AoE, which can be iframed to protect yourself and your AI teammates. Even when boss parts aren't crucial to target for difficulty reasons, it's usually right to go after them. In some raids, they drop lucrative items, and in others, they just increase the amount of regular quality drops you get. And if nothing else, the demolish animation immobilizes the raid boss temporarily. In fact, speed strats often involve effectively animation locking the boss among overdrive, break, and demolish animations so they can't effectively move or use any of their more annoying attacks. To let your co-op allies know which part you want to target, tap the part name at the top of the screen. They may or may not cooperate, but this is one of the few ways to communicate your game plan. The other big way to communicate in raid events is through stickers. People often overlook stickers, and it does take some time getting used to opening up the sticker menu mid-battle. I suggest having On Me on your first page of stickers for raid events, and other stickers like Shapeshift Now, Together, or Look Out are also valuable. This can not only be used to tell your allies to target a particular boss part, it can also help them dodge hard to avoid attacks and group up to counteract moves like Fragonath's volcanoes. Unfortunately, not everyone you meet in public lobbies is going to coordinate with you, but it's worth a shot. This is also why Discord and alliances are awesome tools when you really need to plan for a raid. As far as what isn't quite as good in raids, afflictions and bleed tend to cap out very quickly, so they're preferred in smaller amounts. Many raid bosses, especially the older ones, are completely immune to all afflictions to begin with, making affliction-focused characters much weaker. Bleed, in contrast, is always fairly solid, it's just that it caps at 3 stacks, after which it can't be applied, and that cap will be very easily hit among 16 units. Adventurers who get better with afflictions but are still strong without them, like Gala Alex, are still respectable in raids, but those who rely primarily on affliction punishers for damage, like Hawk, are worse. And since we've mentioned Gala Alex and Gala Cleo already, yep, off-element characters are fine for raids, and many are even quite strong. I'm definitely looking at the shadow element with this remark. You just need to be cognizant that they're more prone to getting afflicted or one-shot during the battle. It's also fine to put utility dragons like Phoenix onto adventurers, even if they don't necessarily match elements. Defensive characters are also slightly questionable in raids unless they're the cream of the crop. The reason for this is that easier difficulties end super quickly, hence rewarding DPS, and harder difficulties tend to one-shot vulnerable units, making defense slightly less effective. This isn't to say they're totally useless, it's just worth thinking about whether pure defense is really the issue, or if you could do a better job avoiding attacks using iframes and careful play. Very strong defensive units like Halloween Lowen, Patia, Grace, or Gala Alisan can still serve a valuable niche for those who are genuinely struggling to avoid damage using iframes and AI management. Having said that, good use of iframes and AI manipulation is often what makes or breaks raid runs. In a harder difficulty raid, it's worth assuming that any move could be lethal for your team. Try time your skills just when the boss is going to use a red or yellow AoE attack to give your entire team iframes and prevent them from taking any damage. By playing the raid in solo, which you can do by starting a room before any players join, you can also practice and get a sense for when certain boss attacks happen and which ones are particularly devastating. For example, Fragnoth has a huge dash attack that it's good to have iframes ready for, since the large area of effect means your AI won't always avoid it in time. Knowing the boss patterns also helps with positioning and recognizing when you need to disengage the boss. For example, Fragnoth has a flame breath attack from his head that makes staying near his tail much safer for your AI than venturing too far affront. Disengaging early is another key concept. This is when you run away with your lead unit until you lose the targeting reticle on the boss and any of its parts. This can help your AI avoid purple attacks like Fragnoth's tailspin or his volcanic eruptions. You do need to run a bit early in raid boss fights because their huge size means it can be tricky to lose your lock-on. Another tip to make things easier to manage in raid boss fights is to change your camera settings. I prefer to zoom all the way out and turn off camera redistancing, skill shake, and any other types of camera effects. Another thing that helps with raids is general knowledge of the background mechanics of the game. For example, ranged characters have only 80% of the defense of melee characters. Recognizing this might lead you to opt to control your ranged character to better protect them, or lead you to swap to them during difficult segments for a defensive shapeshift, or to manually move them to safety. Lance and Blade leads often feel fantastic for raid events because their force strikes give them the high mobility needed to chase after raid boss parts and zip around the battlefield. Ultimately, a lot of performing well in raid events just comes down to good overall fundamentals in your Dragalia gameplay. And, well, that's about all I have to say on the Loyalties Requiem raid event and on raid events as a whole. The Omega 2 Challenge was a fun new addition for veteran players like myself, but thankfully the rewards aren't so exclusive that anyone should feel left out. The main draw is that it makes raids tough and compelling once again, despite the boost system and overall power creep. I hope you enjoyed the gameplay I interspersed during this video, and for the record, I know that Eleonora wasn't great for the Omega 2 raid, I just had to see if it could be done. Thankfully, Pietro was right there by your side, and the two made it through just fine. Keep in mind, this was a coordinated team, and it wasn't my first clear, which really came down to the wire. So just keep trying, and don't be afraid to seek help over on the Discord if you need a hand with Omega 2, now or in the future. The link, like always, is in the description below. Alright, I'd love to hear what your Loyalties Requiem experience has been like and whether you have any other tips for raid events in the comments. Otherwise, everyone, I hope this video has been helpful. Thank you as always for watching, take care, and I'll see you next time.